Your homework and quiz is going to just be questions over this, finding angle measurements and side lengths, just using these 6 properties. And so at home, how can you study for the quiz? How can you study for the test? Draw yourself a draw yourself a kite, and then add these 2 segments. That's it. One, and then mark what you know because of that 1 segment, and that creates 2 congruent triangles. And using CPCTC. And once you're done with that, draw on the 2nd segment, and say, okay, that diagonal is being bisected and they're perpendicular. That's how you get all 6 C's. It's really not that bad. But the thing is you have to use your prior knowledge of congruent triangles and CPCTC and isosceles triangles and the base angle theorem. Like all this is just building upon itself. All right, we're going to go to our next quadrilateral for today, which is trapezoids. We first need to identify the parts of trapezoids. We're going to write the definition. We're going to write the definition. The definition is the trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. That is your definition, this very first sentence. We're going to continue writing the other sentences, but this is all you know by the definition. Exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. Parallel sides are bases, the non-parallel sides are legs. And the last thing is about the base angles of trapezoids. Pairs of consecutive angles that include each of the bases are called base angles. We're going to draw a trapezoid together, and I want the bases to be horizontal. I want them to have a slope of 0. I want your bases to be horizontal. Now your trapezoid doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but I do want the bases going horizontally, and then your bottom left vertex to be T, your top left to be R, top right to be A, and your bottom right to be P. So we have trapezoid TRAP. And we're going to identify the parts of this trapezoid that we have drawn. First, we need to look at the bases. Can you identify the bases of a given trapezoid? Then we also need to look at the legs. Can you identify the legs of a given trapezoid? And then we'll discuss the base angles as well. So who can tell me one of the bases of this trapezoid? Say it louder.
Segment RA.
Segment RA. Thank you for saying first what the geometric object is. These are segments, like sides of quadrilaterals or any polygons are segments. So one base is segment RA. And the other one is?
Segment TP.
And segment TP. These are your 2 bases. They are going to be parallel to one another. The bases of trapezoids are parallel. And then you have your legs. In this case, for this trapezoid, what are the legs?
Segment TR.
And?
Segment A or P.
Now, could I have called that segment PA?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We're just naming these geometric objects. If we were comparing them and trying to match corresponding parts of 2, then yeah, your letter order matters. But we're just naming these objects. So I could have called that segment AR, segment PT, segment RT, segment PA, if we wanted to. We're just identifying these. Good, so those are your 4 sides. And notice how your bases and your legs are opposite sides. These are your 2 pairs of opposite sides. Now looking at the angles, you should have written down that the pair of consecutive, okay, consecutive means right next to each other, one after another. The pairs of consecutive angles that include the bases, meaning So these base angles, it says that they're consecutive, so we have to choose two angles that are right next to each other, but it has to include a base, meaning that base has to be in between these two consecutive angles. So what would be a pair of base angles? There's two pairs of base angles in trapezoids. Who can give me one pair of base angles? Angle R and angle A. Yes, angle R and angle A. And then your other pair?
Angle T and angle P.
Angle T and angle B. What you need to write down is when isosceles. So if your trapezoid is isosceles, these base angles are congruent. Okay? So when trapezoid is isosceles, then base angles congruent. That's only if it's an isosceles trapezoid. What does isosceles mean? Going back to like the Greek meaning. Did we ever talk about that? Iso and skelios makes up isosceles. Something legs. So what's unique about the legs when it's isosceles? Same. Iso means same. Skelios, legs. So same legs, just like a triangle. So when your legs are the same, that's isosceles, and just like an isosceles triangle, your base angles are congruent. Same thing happens with the trapezoid. Let's look at the other two pairs of consecutive angles. So this is one pair of consecutive angles, and this is the other pair of consecutive angles that we have yet to talk about. Because these two are base angles, and these two are base angles. Whenever you have parallel lines, you need to think of the angles that are being formed when cut by a transversal. Do you remember what those were? You had a set of parallel lines, and that set of parallel lines were being cut by a transversal. You had those. Ugh, that's annoying. Now let's go down there. Sorry. We looked at these 8 angles. This was a whole unit in this class. We took a test over it and everything. This was a while ago. Okay, but when you have this situation, especially when you have parallel lines, that's when this is really important, is that we looked at 4 angles. Your alternate interior, alternate exterior, and alternate interior. What happens when those lines are parallel? What happened with those angles? They were congruent. Corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior angles were congruent if lines are parallel. There was one more classification of angles that we looked at in this diagram. What were those? Same side interior. What were true about same side interior angles when lines are parallel? Supplementary. Okay. Well, because trapezoids have a set of parallel lines, the legs act as 2 different transversals. Okay? So, ignore this leg right now. Let's just look at leg RT. Well, here are your 2 parallel lines, and this is your transversal. We're not going to be talking about alternate exterior angles, because I don't care about the angles that are in the exterior right now. We're also not going to be talking about alternate interior, because if I go to the opposite side of this transversal, I'm outside of the shape again. We're not going to be talking about corresponding angles, because if I want the corresponding angle with this, then that's up here, not even in the shape. So we're dealing with trapezoids for now, and just considering the legs as transversals, how could you classify these 2 angles right here? They're same side interior. Well, by the definition of trapezoid, it says that the bases are always going to be parallel. So what's always true about the other set of consecutive angles? Not the base angles, but the other set. They're always going to be supplementary. Okay? So we talked about these base angles, and that's good that you can identify them, and you need to know that when your trapezoid is isosceles, that those are congruent. But you need to write down that the other 2 pairs of consecutive angles are always supplementary. other two pairs of consecutive angles are always supplementary. I'm just going to put SUPP for supplementary. SUPP for supplementary.
Watch out.
We talked about a segment that connected midpoints, and we discussed it with a triangle. What do we call that segment? A segment that connects midpoints. The mid-segment, okay? A trapezoid has a mid-segment, okay? You can find the midpoint